The council chamber was enormous, a structure that seemed to stretch forever. Its walls shimmered with faint energy patterns, and every seat was occupied by a representative of a different species. The light bounced off metallic feathers, scaled, skin, and translucent membranes, creating a spectacle that was both beautiful and intimidating. In the center of it all, humans sat quietly, their presence unassuming but deliberate. For centuries, a galactic council had watched humans with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. They were known as a polite species, always calm, always reasonable, and always restrained. Some said humans had the patience of mountains. Others argued that it was weakness disguised as civility. Either way, humans had earned a reputation for diplomacy. Even when others provoked or insulted them, they never reacted with anger. That day, the council thought they would see the same behavior once again. The chamber buzzed with conversation. Alien delegates were exchanging notes, their voices carrying tones humans had never heard before. Some were guttural and harsh, some melodic and soothing, and some even communicated with colors and patterns that flickered across their skin. The humans remained still, quietly observing, as if the noise around them was just background music. Their hands rested on the table, eyes scanning, their expressions calm but alert. The council meeting began with routine matters. Trade disputes were discussed, disputes over planetary territories were debated, and minor infractions were brought to light. The humans listened politely, occasionally nodding, never interrupting, never raising their voices. Other species occasionally glared at them, trying to provoke a reaction, but each time, the humans simply maintained their composure. This behavior had always puzzled the council. How could a species endure mockery, disrespect, and even threats without showing anger? Was it intelligence? Was it fear? Or was it something deeper? No one had truly figured it out, and perhaps that was part of why humans had survived so long. They didn't react impulsively. They planned, observed, and waited. The meeting seemed to progress normally until the representative from the Varkan Empire stood up. He was tall and broad, with armor that gleamed under the chamber lights. His voice boomed across the hall, a mix of menace and amusement. "We have a message for the council," he said. "It comes from one of our fleets. You humans may find it educational." The Varkan Empire representative tapped his wrist device, and a large projection filled the center of the chamber. The screen showed a human research colony orbiting a remote planet. It had been peaceful, thriving, and entirely unarmed. But the projection quickly shifted, revealing a fleet of Varkan warships descending on the colony. Lasers fired, shields collapsed, and the colony's structures were torn apart. The aliens in the chamber chuckled, some even clapping, while others watched in tense silence. The humans didn't react. They sat still, their faces calm, their eyes focused. There was no scream, no shout, no sudden movement. For a moment, the chamber felt as though time itself had stopped. The humans were not showing shock or anger, they were simply watching. Finally, one human stood. It was a woman, her movements smooth and deliberate. She closed her datapad with a quiet snap and looked toward the council. Her voice was soft, but carried weight. "Polite mode, ... off." The words were brief, almost casual, but they cut through the noise of the chamber like a blade. The translation devices struggled to capture the tone, the intent, and the subtle threat behind those simple words. Some delegates tilted their heads, confused. Others felt a cold, creeping fear that spread through their bodies. Even those who didn't understand human language sensed something had changed. After speaking, the human sat back down without another word. The Varkan representative laughed, assuming the calm was a sign of weakness. "So quiet," he said mockingly. "Perhaps they are too shocked to react." But the humans were not shocked. They were preparing. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Every delegate in the chamber could feel it, even those from species far removed from human emotion. Something had shifted. Humanity had turned a corner, and no one knew exactly what was coming next. Outside the chamber, humans on Earth and across their colonies were moving with purpose. Fleets that had always been stationed for exploration or defense were now activating in unison. Ships that had been quietly orbiting planets for years began to maneuver in precise patterns. Communications went dark, not in fear, but in strategy. Humanity had a way of showing power without making noise, and they had reached the point where silence itself became a weapon. Back in the council chamber, some delegates tried to laugh off the moment. They made small jokes about human emotional unpredictability, but the laughter felt hollow. There was a tension now that no one could ignore. Every eye turned toward the humans, waiting for the next sign, the next word, the next move. And still, the humans did nothing. That nothing was more terrifying than any attack. The council had always relied on communication, on negotiation, on visible actions to judge strength. But humans had introduced a new variable, restraint that carried weight. The calm, the silence, the deliberate inaction. It was all part of their power. For centuries, the council had studied human behavior, believing that politeness was their greatest charm. Now, they were realizing it could be their greatest weapon. In the hours that followed, the council began receiving scattered reports. Alien fleets in remote sectors were suddenly inactive, their movements frozen without explanation. Outposts that had been attacking human trade routes went dark. Planets that had been under threat were suddenly safe, their aggressors gone without warning. The council members watched these reports with growing horror. They had underestimated the humans, believing that kindness and patience were weaknesses. But patience is not weakness, they realized. Patience is preparation, and preparation can be far more dangerous than recklessness. In the chamber, the humans remained calm. They did not gloat. They did not shout. They simply waited, letting the council absorb the lesson in real time. Every other species in the room could feel it. The balance had shifted, and humans were no longer just observers. They were a force that demanded recognition, respect, and caution. For the first time in history, the council understood something fundamental about humanity. Politeness was not merely a habit. It was a choice. And when humans chose to remove that layer of civility, the results were swift, precise, and undeniable. The council had watched humans for centuries, assuming they were harmless. Now they knew the truth. Humanity's calm was not an absence of power. It was control over it. By the time the session ended, no one spoke carelessly. The Varkan Empire representative, once so smug and confident, left the chamber with a stiffness to his posture that had not been there before. Other delegates avoided looking directly at the humans, unsure if any glance might provoke an unexpected response. Humanity had not even raised a weapon yet, but the message was clear. Do not mistake restraint for weakness. That day, the Galactic Council witnessed something no species had expected. They saw the polite side of humanity fade in an instant, revealing a force that had always been there, quiet and patient, waiting for the right moment. And even though the humans had not shouted, had not fought, had not declared war, every delegate left the chamber with the same thought. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated. For humans, it had been a simple choice. Polite mode was off. That small decision had changed the perception of the entire galaxy, reminding everyone that beneath kindness could lie unmatched power, and that restraint could be more dangerous than aggression. And for the council, it was a day they would never forget. The calm of the council chamber had barely settled after the humans. Quiet warning when events outside began to unfold rapidly. while the alien delegates still tried to interpret the meaning of the human words. Back on Earth and its colonies, a very different scene was taking place. For centuries, humans had quietly built defenses, fleets, and systems that were invisible to the wider galaxy. They were careful, meticulous, and patient. But now, every piece of that careful preparation was in motion. It started subtly. Ships that had been in orbit for years, some classified as research vessels, began reorienting themselves. Sensors flickered on, weapon systems aligned automatically, and communication networks pulsed with activity. Humans on these ships were calm, almost serene, as if performing a daily routine. They were not panicked, not angry. They were ready. Meanwhile, intelligence. Teams on Earth's command centers were monitoring the council chamber feeds. Every alien representative who had once mocked humanity now sat frozen, their movements slowed by uncertainty. The humans on screen were not just sitting, they were observing, calculating, and planning. And they were no longer smiling politely. There was a new resolve in their eyes, subtle but unmistakable. Then came the first official trigger. A transmission from one of the human colonies appeared on the Council's monitoring systems. It was a live feed showing one of the colonies under attack, not just the one the Varkan Empire had showcased earlier, but several others in distant sectors. The colonies had been peaceful, focused on research, agriculture, and trade, completely unarmed. But the alien fleets thought they were safe. They thought humans would only complain, perhaps send a polite request for negotiation. The feed showed human technicians, scientists, and defense coordinators moving with astonishing speed. Systems that had been dormant for years activated instantly. Shields rose, invisible drones deployed, and automated defenses locked onto attacking ships. The alien fleets were caught off guard. Their weapons fired, but every shot was deflected, disabled, or rerouted harmlessly into space. For a moment, the attacking forces were confused, unsure if they were witnessing a technical failure or an extraordinary coincidence. Back in the council chamber, confusion turned into alarm. Delegates exchanged frantic signals, muttering in languages humans did not understand. Some of the younger species tried to laugh, assuming the humans were overreacting. But the more experienced delegates sensed the shift immediately. The calm humans had warned them about was no longer theoretical. It was happening in real time, and no one could stop it. Humans, meanwhile, did not speak over the transmissions. They did not issue threats or demand surrender. They simply observed their systems in operation. Every defensive move was precise, elegant, and devastatingly effective. Ships that had once intimidated human colonies now drifted, powerless in the void. The humans had prepared for this moment without making a sound, and now the moment had arrived. The Varkan representative's face turned pale. He had expected protests, perhaps petitions, but not this. Entire fleets that had been ready to attack human worlds were being disabled without humans even leaving their stations. He tried to issue commands, but the systems they relied on were being disrupted in ways they could not anticipate. Communications failed. Weapons systems malfunctioned. Even their faster-than-light navigation grids were momentarily jammed. Humans had created a defense that was invisible, silent, and overwhelming. This was not the work of panic or fear. It was methodical, deliberate, and almost surgical. Humans had waited for the exact right moment to act. They had studied every possible outcome, every potential weakness, and had prepared countermeasures that the Council had not even imagined. Every move humans made was precise, a direct reflection of centuries of restraint and planning. Meanwhile, the council chamber itself became a place of tension. Delegates who had previously mocked humanity now sat rigid, unable to focus on anything but the live transmissions. Some whispered among themselves, trying to figure out how humans could be so powerful, yet so controlled. Others simply stared, frozen, realizing that politeness and patience had been humanity's greatest secret all along. In the colonies under threat, humans worked together seamlessly. Civilians moved efficiently, following instructions without confusion. Scientists operated defense arrays with calm hands. Technicians rerouted power, and commanders coordinated fleets with quiet authority. There was no panic, no chaos, only focus. Every human knew their role. Every human acted in harmony, and every human understood the stakes. The alien fleets, in contrast, were in disarray. Orders were ignored by malfunctioning systems, their ships drifting or spinning helplessly. Some tried to retreat, but human control over the battlefield was so complete that escape was nearly impossible. They had underestimated a species that had always smiled politely, always nodded respectfully, and always avoided conflict when possible. Now, they were learning that patience could hide unimaginable power. The humans did not gloat. They did not celebrate. They moved with purpose, as if every action was simply part of their normal routine. But the impact was unmistakable. Entire fleets that had once been symbols of power were now paralyzed. Colonies that had been on the brink of destruction were untouched. And the Council, watching everything unfold, began to understand the full meaning of what the humans had done. They had removed the threat without unnecessary destruction. For the humans, this was the point. Their goal had never been revenge or aggression. It was correction. Every fleet, every ship, every outpost that had attacked their people had been neutralized, not to punish, but to ensure that no one could threaten humanity again without facing consequences. And they had done it quietly, efficiently, and without emotion clouding their judgment. Back on Earth, the command centers monitored every sector. Humans were calm, but fully alert. They had planned for every possibility, and now their planning was proving flawless. The Council's delegates could only watch in awe and fear. This was a species that had been underestimated for centuries, and now the galaxy was seeing them in their full capability, not through anger or aggression, but through quiet, deliberate action. As the hours passed, it became clear that the humans had not just defended themselves. They had taught a lesson. Every alien fleet that had attempted to attack human colonies had been shown the consequences of underestimating humanity. Every species watching had learned that patience, calm, and politeness could mask an extraordinary force. Waiting for the right moment to act. In the council chamber, the Varkan representative finally spoke, his voice trembling. This ... this cannot be happening. They are too coordinated, too precise, too calm. The words were an admission of fear, and every delegate understood it immediately. Humans were not like any other species they had encountered. Their calm was not fear. Their patience was not weakness. Their politeness had always been a mask, hiding an intelligence, a skill, and a strength that no one had fully appreciated. Meanwhile, humans in the colonies continued their work. They communicated through quiet signals, moved with precision, and coordinated their defenses flawlessly. Nothing was rushed, nothing was wasted, and every decision was made with a calm determination. This was not chaos. This was order. This was humanity showing what it meant to be truly prepared. By the end of the day, the Council had received reports from every sector. Human colonies were safe, alien fleets that had attacked were neutralized, and the galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary. Humans had turned a moment of potential disaster into a demonstration of unparalleled discipline and effectiveness. And they had done it all without shouting, without anger, without aggression. The council delegates left the chamber in silence. Some were shocked. Some were fearful. Some were trying to understand what they had just seen. And the humans? They returned to their usual calm demeanor, sitting quietly, watching and waiting. Polite mode had been turned off when it mattered, but now it was back on. Humans had shown their strength, corrected the threat, and restored order. And in doing so, they had reminded the entire galaxy of one simple truth. Under their calm, humanity was a force that could not be ignored. For humans, it was just another day. But for the Council, it was a day they would never forget. The day they realized that polite humans could act with precision and power that no one had ever expected, and that politeness had never been a weakness, but a choice. And now the galaxy was beginning to understand that when humans chose to act, the consequences were immediate, undeniable, and absolute. After the first wave of human action, the Council and the galaxy were beginning to realize that something unprecedented was happening. What started as calm observation had now escalated into a full demonstration of humanity's capacity for precision and strategy. The colonies, once considered vulnerable, were now secure. Alien fleets that had seemed unstoppable were paralyzed. And still, humans remained quiet, organized, and deliberate. In the outer sectors, intelligence reports began arriving in waves. Human fleets were appearing where they had never been expected. Ships that had always operated silently in the shadows were now coordinating across vast distances with flawless timing. Entire battle groups of humans seemed to materialize in multiple sectors simultaneously. There was no panic, no chaos, no confusion, only a remarkable display of coordination and discipline. The alien commanders struggled to comprehend it. Their own fleets, built for power, aggression, and dominance, were suddenly ineffective. Weapon systems jammed, engines malfunctioned, and communications failed without any clear explanation. Some tried to retreat, but human-controlled systems tracked them with unerring accuracy. It was as if every human vessel was connected to a single mind, anticipating each move and countering it before it could be made. Back on Earth, the command centers remained calm. Humans moved with quiet precision, monitoring every sector, every fleet, every planet. They did not shout orders. They did not panic. Every action was deliberate, calculated, and efficient. Their focus was absolute, their discipline unmatched. They were not acting out of fear or anger. They were acting out of responsibility. Every ship, every crew member, every technician knew their role and executed it perfectly. In the Council chamber, the atmosphere had changed completely. The delegates who had once mocked humans now watched in a mixture of awe and fear. The Varkan Empire representative, still visibly shaken, muttered under his breath about the inconceivable coordination of the human forces. Other delegates whispered nervously among themselves, trying to understand how a species so polite, so calm, could suddenly become so overwhelmingly capable. Reports continued to arrive. Human fleets had moved into positions that neutralized threats without unnecessary destruction. Colonies that had been targeted were unharmed. Trade routes that had been disrupted were restored. Alien outposts that had threatened human settlements were suddenly offline, their crews confused and powerless. It was not chaos. It was control. It was precision. And it was a demonstration of something the galaxy had never truly seen before. The real power of humanity. Even the most experienced alien strategists could not make sense of it. They had trained for years to anticipate aggression, to respond to attacks, to plan for surprise maneuvers. Yet, against the humans, their experience was irrelevant. Humans did not fight recklessly. They did not react impulsively. They acted with patience, observing every detail, calculating every possibility, and executing their plan with exacting precision. In one remote sector, an alien commander attempted a bold move, sending a fleet to ambush a human outpost. But the humans had already predicted it. By the time the alien ships arrived, their engines were disrupted, their weapons disabled, and their fleet immobilized. The humans did not even fire a shot. They simply used technology and strategy to neutralize. The threat without unnecessary violence. The aliens were stunned. They had been defeated not by aggression, but by foresight, discipline, and control. Meanwhile, humans continued to coordinate across light years. Communications between fleets were quiet and efficient, using channels that alien intelligence had never detected. They moved as one organism, responding instantly to threats and protecting their colonies. Every human knew their mission, understood the stakes, and acted without hesitation. There was no fear, no hesitation, no anger, only focus. The Council watched in growing concern. Humans had proven that their polite demeanor was not weakness, it was preparation. The calm had been a choice, the patience a strategy. And now, a galaxy could see the result. A species that had once been underestimated, ignored, and even mocked had revealed the full extent of its capabilities. Alien fleets began to withdraw, not because they had lost a battle in the traditional sense, but because they realized resistance was futile. Humans were everywhere, yet nowhere. They had neutralized every threat efficiently, decisively, and without unnecessary destruction. It was not a display of wrath. It was a display of competence, control, and power. In the council chamber, delegates could no longer maintain their composure. Some left in silence. Others whispered frantically among themselves, trying to comprehend what had just occurred. The humans, still calm and collected, did not celebrate, did not boast. They had acted, they had corrected the threats, and now they waited. Their patience was once again evident, but this time it was paired with undeniable proof of their strength. In human colonies, life continued, but now with a new awareness. Citizens moved efficiently, performing their roles with quiet determination. Scientists, engineers, and commanders coordinated flawlessly, ensuring every colony remained safe and every fleet operated effectively. Even civilians, aware of the larger situation, acted calmly, supporting the efforts without fear. Humanity's strength was not just in technology or strategy. It was in the people, all working together, all understanding their purpose. By the end of the day, the Council received reports from across the galaxy. Every human colony was secure. Every alien fleet that had threatened humans had been neutralized. Trade routes were restored, communication lines repaired, and the galaxy had witnessed a species capable of acting with patience, precision, and overwhelming effectiveness. The Council realized a fundamental truth. Humans had never been ordinary. Politeness was not a mask, it was a choice. Patience was not passivity, it was preparation. And calmness was not weakness, it was control. For the first time, the galaxy understood the full meaning of the phrase the human representative had spoken in the council chamber. Polite mode ... off. Humans had demonstrated that they could protect themselves without resorting to unnecessary violence, that they could act with precision and coordination, and that their calm demeanor was not to be underestimated. The alien fleets had been shown that aggression would be met with consequences beyond their expectations. The Council itself had been reminded that underestimating humanity was a dangerous mistake. For humans, it was just another day. They had acted decisively, corrected the threats, and restored order. For the rest of the galaxy, it was a revelation. A polite species had turned into a force of remarkable competence, showing that patience, discipline, and focus could be more powerful than brute strength. As the day ended, humans returned to their usual calm demeanor. In the council chamber, their representatives once again appeared polite, measured, and composed, yet the memory of their actions remained. The galaxy had seen the real-time awakening of humanity, and no one would ever forget it. Polite mode had been turned off, but the consequences had been clear. Humans were not to be underestimated, mocked, or provoked. Their restraint had been a warning, their patience a demonstration, and their power undeniable. And as the stars shone over Earth and the human colonies, One fact was certain. The galaxy had witnessed the full potential of humanity, and from that day forward, no species would ever treat them the same way again. After the first displays of human precision and restraint, the galaxy was finally beginning to understand something the Council had long underestimated. Humans had shown they could defend themselves without unnecessary destruction. Now, the real-time awakening was about to take shape. Across multiple sectors, human influence began appearing in ways no one could have anticipated. It started with movement. Human fleets, which had remained largely hidden, began coordinating on a scale that seemed impossible. Ships that had been scattered across thousands of light years suddenly appeared in critical positions around key sectors. It wasn't teleportation or magic, it was careful planning, preparation, and logistics that had been perfected over decades. Humans moved silently, but their presence was unmistakable. Alien intelligence networks began detecting these fleets, and confusion spread quickly. They had no idea how humans had done it so fast or with such precision. The humans didn't make a sound, didn't broadcast messages or threats. They simply appeared ready, organized, and calm. Their ships formed precise patterns in space, holding positions that blocked escape routes, protected colonies, and secured trade lanes. It was not chaos. It was perfect order. And it was terrifying to those who had assumed humans were just polite. And weak. Alien commanders tried to regroup. Orders were shouted across bridge consoles, and fleets attempted sudden maneuvers to regain control. But the humans anticipated everything. Systems that had been dormant suddenly activated, disabling engines, jamming communications, and redirecting weapons harmlessly into space. The alien ships were alive with confusion, spinning helplessly or drifting without direction. They had underestimated humans. They had assumed politeness was weakness. Now they realized it was a trap, a calm before a storm they couldn't understand. On Earth, human command centers operated with quiet efficiency. Scientists monitored energy levels, engineers tracked ship positions, and commanders coordinated fleet movements with calm voices over secure channels. Every human knew their role and executed it perfectly. It wasn't about aggression. It was about precision. It was about control. And above all, it was about protecting humanity and every colony without unnecessary destruction. The Council watched in stunned silence. The room that had once been filled with chatter, mockery, and arrogant laughter was now tense and almost fearful. Every delegate could see it happening in real time. Humans were everywhere and nowhere at once, influencing battles and outcomes without raising a single weapon unnecessarily. Even the most confident alien strategists could not comprehend it. The real-time awakening intensified as humans expanded their influence. Fleets that had been harassing colonies found themselves immobilized by technology they couldn't understand. Drones and automated defense systems intercepted incoming attacks, disabling them with surgical precision. Trade routes were reopened, colonies were secured, and every human presence acted in perfect harmony with the others. It was as if the humans were connected to a single mind, anticipating threats and responding faster than anyone could react. Humans themselves did not celebrate. They did not issue commands loudly, and there was no chaos on their bridges. Even civilians on the colonies participated, following instructions calmly and efficiently. Scientists recalibrated defense systems, engineers rerouted power to shields, and technicians monitored every variable with careful attention. There was no panic, no fear, no desperation, only calm, focused action. The alien fleets, on the other hand, were in complete disarray. Ships that had once been symbols of strength now drifted helplessly in space. Weapon systems failed, engines jammed, and communications were cut off. Attempts to regroup only made things worse, as humans anticipated each move and neutralized. it without unnecessary destruction. For the first time, these species understood the true meaning of human patience and calm. It was not weakness, it was strategy, power, and control. Even those species who had once treated humans with disdain now watched in awe and fear. The Council itself struggled to comprehend what was happening. Humans had not only defended themselves, had shown the galaxy their full capacity for strategic coordination, discipline, and execution. Their polite demeanor had been a mask hiding an intelligence and power that no one had fully understood. Now the mask was off, and the result was undeniable. In one remote sector, a fleet of alien ships tried a sudden, aggressive maneuver to bypass human defenses and attack a critical colony. But humans had anticipated it. Within moments, the alien ships were immobilized, their engines and weapon systems disabled with surgical precision. Not a single human had fired a weapon. The humans had achieved total control without unnecessary destruction. The alien commanders were stunned. They realized that no amount of aggression could succeed against a species so coordinated, disciplined, and patient. Humans did not gloat. They did not celebrate. They simply observed, monitored, and maintained their positions. Every movement was deliberate, every action calculated, and every decision measured. They were not reckless. They were not impulsive. They were in complete control. The galaxy was witnessing a new definition of power, calm, precise, and unstoppable. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the command centers remained quiet but intensely focused. Engineers adjusted power grids, scientists monitored defenses, and commanders coordinated fleets across light years. Everyone understood their role, and everyone acted without hesitation. It was not fear that motivated them. It was purpose. Humans were protecting their people, their colonies, and their way of life, and they were doing it with a level of discipline that few species could comprehend. Reports continued to arrive in the council chamber. Alien fleets were immobilized, colonies were secured, and trade routes were reopened. Every human colony that had been threatened was now safe. The galaxy had witnessed a display of power and coordination that no one had anticipated. Humans had not used anger, aggression, or chaos. They had used precision, patience, and discipline. And the result was overwhelming. The council delegates realized something fundamental. Humans were not just polite, they were powerful. Politeness had never been a weakness. Patience had never been a sign of passivity. Calmness had never been a lack of action. Instead, these traits had been their greatest strength, allowing humans to prepare, plan, and act with efficiency unmatched by any other species. By the end of the day, the galaxy had seen humanity in full control. Alien fleets that had attempted to attack were immobilized or neutralized. Colonies were safe, trade routes were secure, and communication networks were fully restored. The humans themselves returned to their usual calm demeanor, polite and composed, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. But the Council and the other species would never forget. Humanity had shown the galaxy what it meant to be truly disciplined, coordinated, and capable of precise action. Polite mode had been turned off, and the result had been a display of control and power that no one would ever underestimate again. The day ended with a new understanding among all species. Humans were not to be mocked, underestimated, or treated as weak. Their calmness, patience, and politeness were not limitations. They were choices, strategies, and a source of unmatched strength. The real-time awakening had begun, and the galaxy had witnessed it in full. For humans, it was just another day. But for the Council and the rest of the galaxy, it was a day that would forever change the way they viewed humanity. Polite mode had been turned off, but the lesson was clear. Humans were a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy would never forget the quiet, controlled power that they had just revealed. By the time humans had shown the first signs of real-time coordination across the galaxy, it was already clear to every species, watching that something extraordinary was unfolding. Alien fleets that had once threatened human colonies were now immobilized or neutralized. Trade routes were reopened, and every colony that had been at risk was completely secure. But humans were not done yet. They had one final message to deliver, not with words, not with threats, but with decisive action that left no room for doubt. In the council chamber, the atmosphere had shifted completely. Delegates who had once mocked humans now sat rigidly, unsure how to react. Even the Varkan Empire representative, whose arrogance had previously been unshakable, now appeared pale and tense. Whispers filled the room as representatives tried to understand the scale of human influence. Every report streaming in from the outer sectors only added to the sense of awe and fear. Humans, however, remained calm. They did not raise their voices, did not demand attention, and did not issue threats. They observed quietly, responding to each situation with precision. The silence in the council chamber was deafening. The delegates had realized, perhaps too late, that humanity's patience had been intentional, their restraint a choice, and their politeness a mask for preparation. Then came the first clear demonstration of what humanity could do beyond defense. Across multiple sectors, human-controlled systems began actively neutralizing aggressive alien assets. Weapons were disabled, engines jammed, and strategic positions secured, not to destroy, but to correct. Fleets that had once posed a direct threat were immobilized systematically. The humans had turned the tables completely, showing that aggression against them would be met with exact, unavoidable consequences. The speed and precision of human action stunned the galaxy. Ships that had been planning attacks suddenly found themselves surrounded or blocked without any warning. Advanced alien technology, designed for combat and defense, failed to respond to conventional tactics. It was as if humans had predicted every possible move, every potential outcome, and had prepared for it in advance. They did not fire in anger. They did not scream commands. They acted with the quiet authority of a species that had long learned the value of preparation and foresight. On one isolated colony, alien commanders attempted a desperate maneuver, sending multiple warships to bypass human defenses. Within minutes, the human fleets reacted. Shields enveloped the colony. Drones and automated defense systems intercepted the attacking ships, and communication jammers disrupted their coordination. By the time the aliens realized what had happened, their fleet was immobilized, engines failing, weapons offline, and their path back cut off. The humans had achieved complete control without destroying anything unnecessarily. Back on Earth, command centers monitored the situation in real time. Scientists, engineers, and commanders moved with seamless coordination. Every human knew their role, and every role was executed flawlessly. Civilians supported the effort calmly, following instructions, without panic. The scale of coordination was staggering, but humans had prepared for it for decades, quietly building systems that could act faster, more efficiently, and more precisely than any alien technology. In the council chamber, the tension reached its peak. Representatives from every species realized that humans had redefined what power could mean. Politeness had been the mask of strength. Patience had been a tool of preparation. Calmness had been the foundation of precision. And now, humans were proving that restraint could be more formidable than aggression. The humans themselves did not speak. They did not celebrate or gloat. They acted with quiet efficiency, allowing their actions to communicate the message that words could not. Every fleet immobilized, every threat neutralized, every colony secured was a lesson to the galaxy. Aggression against humanity would not be tolerated, and it would be met with precise, overwhelming consequences. For the alien commanders, it was a terrifying revelation. Fleets that had once inspired fear now sat powerless. Technology that had been advanced beyond imagination was rendered ineffective against human strategy. They had underestimated a species that had smiled politely, nodded in council meetings, and avoided conflict whenever possible. That politeness had been deliberate, and now its true meaning was cleared out. As the day progressed, human coordination became even more visible. Across multiple sectors, fleets moved in patterns that were both defensive and corrective. They secured borders, neutralized rogue elements, and protected colonies. Every action was deliberate. Every move was calculated. There was no chaos, no panic, no recklessness. It was not just strength, it was mastery of strategy, timing, and coordination. The alien species began to realize that humanity was not just powerful, they were disciplined, organized, and remarkably patient. Every action was designed not for destruction, but for control. Humans were teaching the galaxy a lesson. You cannot provoke them without consequences, and when they act, it is precise, efficient, and unstoppable. In one particularly tense sector, a fleet of aggressive ships attempted a sudden attack on a human outpost. But humans had anticipated the move. Within moments, the alien ships were surrounded and immobilized. Weapons systems failed, engines jammed, and communication arrays were blocked. The humans had achieved complete control without firing a single shot. The alien commanders were left stunned, realizing that aggression against humans was futile. Meanwhile, in human command centers, the operation continued with the same calm precision. Engineers rerouted power to defense grids, scientists monitored energy flows, and commanders coordinated movements across multiple sectors. Civilians on colonies assisted quietly, following instructions and supporting the effort without hesitation. Every human acted with focus, purpose, and discipline. Back in the council chamber, delegates could only watch. The humans had delivered their message without raising a voice. Every aggressive fleet that had threatened humans was neutralized. Every colony was safe. Every trade route was secured. And humans themselves remained calm, polite, and composed, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The lesson was clear. Humanity's politeness had never been weakness. Their patience had never been passivity. Their calmness had never been inaction. Instead, these qualities had allowed humans to prepare, plan, and execute actions with precision unmatched by any other species. Polite mode had been turned off when it mattered, and the result was unmistakable. Humans were a force to be reckoned with. As the day ended, reports from every sector confirmed the extent of human influence. Alien fleets that had attempted aggression were neutralized. Colonies were secure. Trade routes were functioning. Communication lines were restored. And through it all, humans had maintained their composure, proving that restraint was not weakness, but a choice of strategy that allowed them to act decisively when necessary. In the council chamber, silence reigned. Representatives from every species understood the significance of what had occurred. They had witnessed a polite, patient, and calm species reveal the full extent of its power without unnecessary destruction. Humanity had delivered a message to the galaxy: underestimate them at your own risk. Humans themselves returned to their usual demeanor. They were polite, composed, and observant. But the galaxy had seen the truth. Polite mode had been turned off, and the consequences had been undeniable. Aggression against humanity would be met with decisive, precise, and overwhelming action. And the Council and all other species would remember that lesson for generations to come. It was not about revenge. It was not about dominance. It was about correction, protection, and the responsible use of power. Humanity had shown that they could act decisively when necessary, and that their calm, polite nature was a choice, not a limitation. The galaxy had learned in real time that humans were far more formidable than anyone had imagined. For humans, it was just another day. But for the Council and the other species, it was a revelation. They had witnessed humanity's true capability and learned an unforgettable lesson. Restraint can hide immense power, patience can conceal readiness, and politeness can mask a force that is unstoppable when it chooses to act out. And in the quiet that followed, one truth was clear to everyone. Humanity had not just defended itself, had delivered a lesson that no species would ever forget. The polite humans had shown what it meant to act decisively, strategically, and with unwavering control. The galaxy would never underestimate them again. The day after humanity had delivered its lesson to the galaxy, a quiet stillness settled over the council chambers and the surrounding sectors. Alien fleets that had once been aggressive were either immobilized or returned to their home systems, their crews stunned and confused by the precision and efficiency of the humans. Colonies that had been at risk were fully secure. Trade routes and communication networks were restored. And in all of it, humans moved with calm, deliberate purpose. As if nothing extraordinary had occurred. In the council chamber, representatives from every species sat in an unusual silence. No one spoke at first. Even those who had once laughed at humanity, mocked their polite demeanor, or dismissed them as weak, now looked on with respect and some with fear. The realization had settled in. The humans were not just polite, not just patient, and not just calm. They were a force that combined intelligence, strategy, and restraint in a way no other species had ever mastered. The humans themselves entered the chamber quietly. Their expressions were measured, polite, and composed, as if they had merely come to continue a normal meeting. There was no celebration, no gloating, and no overt display of power. They spoke in calm, measured tones, and their words carried weight because of the actions they had already demonstrated. Every delegate in the chamber understood that humanity's power did not need to be shouted. It was obvious in every detail of what had just occurred. The council, still recovering from the shock, slowly began to speak. Questions were asked carefully, some bordering on nervousness. Delegates tried to understand how humans had coordinated fleets across thousands of light years with such speed and precision. How had they neutralized threats without firing a single shot in some cases? How had they maintained complete control over colonies and trade routes while still appearing calm and polite? Human representatives responded, not with arrogance, but with clarity. They explained that their power was not built overnight. It was the result of decades, even centuries, of planning, preparation, and observation. Politeness had been a choice, patience a strategy, and calmness a tool to maintain control and make better decisions. They did not need to shout or act aggressively to achieve results. They simply acted intelligently, efficiently, and decisively. When necessary, for the Council and all other species, this was a revelation. Humans had not sought revenge. They had not sought to dominate. They had acted to protect their people and their colonies, to correct threats, and to show that aggression against humanity would have consequences. And they had done it all with a level of discipline and coordination that no other species had ever demonstrated. Across the galaxy, the impact of humanity's actions was being felt. Alien fleets that had once been reckless now moved cautiously. Colonies that had thought humans were weak reconsidered their plans. Trade and diplomacy were being reevaluated, and intelligence reports emphasized one clear point. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The polite, patient humans had shown that restraint could hide extraordinary power, and that calmness could be far more dangerous than chaos. In the weeks following, humans continued their usual routines, maintaining security and coordination. Without unnecessary display, their fleets returned to patrol routes, colonies continued their work, and trade routes operated normally. Yet every species in the galaxy had a new understanding. Humans had shown that power could be subtle, precise, and controlled. Politeness and patience had been a warning, and the consequences of ignoring it had been made perfectly clear. The Council convened another meeting, this time with a new sense of respect for humanity. Delegates who had once laughed, mocked, or doubted human capability now addressed the human representatives with caution and politeness that matched their actions. Even those who had opposed humans in the past understood that a single misstep could have disastrous consequences. Humanity's lesson had been delivered without chaos, without unnecessary violence, and yet it was unforgettable. Humans themselves maintained their composure. They continued to speak politely, listen attentively, and engage in discussions without aggression. But the memory of their previous actions lingered in the minds of the delegates. The calm, the patience, the polite demeanor, all of it had been a choice, and that choice had demonstrated a strength that no one would ever forget. Back on Earth and in human colonies, life gradually returned to normal. Scientists resumed research, engineers continued their projects, and civilians went about their daily routines. Yet the confidence and calm that humans carried were different now. They had proven their capability not just to themselves, but to the galaxy. They had shown that their restraint was deliberate and their strength unmatched. It was a quiet pride, one that did not need to be announced, but was felt deeply. For alien species, the lesson was clear. Humans could not be provoked without consequence. Aggression would meet precision, strategy, and efficiency far beyond what anyone had anticipated. The polite humans who had once seemed harmless were now recognized as a species with extraordinary capability. Every fleet, every colony, and every outpost that had witnessed humanity's response carried that knowledge forward. In the council chamber, discussions shifted. Instead of debating the strength of humans, delegates began to consider diplomacy, respect, and collaboration. There was a newfound acknowledgement that any future conflict with humanity would require careful thought, strategy, and humility. For the first time in centuries, humans were not seen as just another species. They were a force with patience, intelligence, and control, capable of reshaping expectations across the galaxy. Humans continued to act with their usual calm and politeness, but now every action carried weight. Even a simple greeting, a nod, or a request was understood to reflect a species capable of overwhelming precision and power if provoked. Their silence, patience, and restraint had become their greatest strengths. The galaxy had seen what happened when humanity's polite mode was turned off, and the impact was lasting. The day ended quietly. In the council chamber, delegates left with a new sense of respect. Alien fleets returned to their sectors. Colonies resumed normal operations, and trade routes continued without interruption. Humanity had restored order and security without chaos, demonstrating that true strength lies in discipline, strategy, and patience. For humans, it was just another day. They had acted decisively when necessary, protected their people, and delivered a lesson that would be remembered for generations. Yet they returned to their calm, polite demeanor, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The galaxy had witnessed the power of restraint, the strength of patience, and the consequence of underestimating a polite species. And so, the Council and the galaxy learned something essential. Humans were not to be underestimated. Their polite mode had been turned off, their strength revealed, and their discipline proven. Yet their nature remained unchanged. Calm, polite, patient, and strategic, humanity had shown that true power does not always shout. Sometimes it waits, observes, and acts with precision when the moment demands it. From that day forward, no species in the galaxy would treat humans the same way again. Respect, caution, and understanding became the new standard. Humanity had delivered a lesson without chaos, without revenge, and without unnecessary violence. They had acted decisively, intelligently, and with control. And the galaxy would remember it forever. The humans returned to their routines, their calm demeanor restored. They had shown their power, and then let it settle quietly, like a storm that had passed without leaving unnecessary destruction in its wake. Their polite mode was back on, but the memory of its temporary absence lingered. The lesson was clear. Patience and politeness could hide extraordinary power, and humanity had proven that they would act decisively when needed. For the Council, the alien fleets, and every species that had observed, one fact was undeniable. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's full capability, and it was a force unlike any other. Politeness was not weakness. Patience was not passivity. Calmness was not inaction. Humanity had turned polite mode off, and in doing so, had reshaped the understanding of strength across the stars. And so, life continued. Humans remained calm, polite, and patient, yet every species knew that beneath that demeanor lay a power that demanded respect. The galaxy had changed in subtle but permanent ways. Humans had acted decisively, efficiently, and with precision. They had delivered their lesson and restored order. And through it all, they had remained unmistakably human, strategic, disciplined, and composed. The story of that day would be told across sectors and generations. It was not a story of conquest or revenge. It was a story of restraint, preparation, and intelligence. Humanity had turned polite mode off, and in doing so, had shown the galaxy that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it waits quietly, watches carefully, and acts with precision that cannot be ignored. And in that quiet, deliberate power, the galaxy understood one truth: humans were not to be underestimated.